Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our final session of the day with Dr. Aaliyah Samuel, President and CEO of the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, known as CASEL. Speaking with you is a true capstone to this incredible day so far. The baseball reference that I like, we've hit a grand, we are the bases loaded right now, and you're batting cleanup to bring a grand slam home and the bottom of the ninth and 2 outs, but the bases are loaded. So here we go, and it's going to be amazing. Right after our fireside chat and Dr. Samuel departs, we'll do a quick closing ceremony in the same session. So please stick around for those that are in. It'll be about 5 minutes. A quick note about tech. Please ask questions using the question answer function on the top right. You can ask questions privately, and we'll get to some of them at the end. Use the chat to engage with us and others. And now, introduction of our esteemed speaker. Dr. Aaliyah A. Samuel takes the helm at CASEL during a time of unprecedented growth for the field of social emotional learning, spearheading initiatives alongside other educators, researchers, and policy leaders to expand SEL nationwide and serving as a leading voice for children's education. Dr. Samuel previously served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Local, State, and National Engagement at the United States Department of Education, as a Senior Fellow at the Center for Developing Child at Harvard University, and a former Executive Vice President of Government Affairs and Partnerships at NWEA. Dr. Samuel is a bilingual executive leader with expertise from early childhood through higher education. Her expertise includes program evaluation and evidence-based programming, data collection and disaggregation, family and community engagement, support strategies, and policy development implementation at the local, state, and national level. She has informed state policy agendas, assisted with developing cross-system approaches to develop policy solutions to support children and families, systems level change. In her role at the NWEA, she led a team working on driving a state and federal education agenda. Prior to NWA, Dr. Samuel was the Director of Education at the National Governors Association. La NGA, her work included business development, strategic planning, and supporting high-ranking state officials on the development of policies that impacted health, education, and workforce. She has worked with diverse constituents, philanthropies, and national partners. I found out when I was doing my research on her, that she's a HBCU alum like myself. She has an undergraduate degree from Tuskegee University, a master's from the University of South Florida, and a specialist in doctor degree from Nova Southeastern. We are so excited to have Dr. Samuel. And one thing that she made me to make sure that I mention is that this bio is amazing, but she has been a principal, she has been a teacher, she has been on the ground floor, accompanying all that I have shared as well. So we're so honored to have her here. So welcome, Dr. Samuel, and let's begin our fireside chat.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks for the intro.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So getting started, CASEL redefined social emotional learning around 2020. What is the greatest benefit to the revised definition?
Great question. So really, I would say that there's two benefits. The first is just overall greater clarity on the skills and environments that support the learning and development of all kids, particularly based on the latest research and implementation. And I'll go a little bit deeper into that, but then also really the emphasis on school, families, and communities working together. And so those, I think, coupled together are really the greatest benefit. And just to dig a little deeper into the both. So as I mentioned, the greater clarity on skills and environments, CASEL's goal has always been the healthy development of children. And like any organization, we are trying to continuously improve and update our work, which really brings us closer to achieving the goal. In the last 3 decades, since CASEL first introduced the term social emotional learning to the field, we know that research and practice have grown tremendously. Today, educators talk about SEL in ways and hear about a multitude of strategies for implementation in schools and the classroom. And CASEL's framework is really intended to help education leaders implement social emotional learning effectively so that it really benefits all children. So when we updated the framework as part of that CQI, or continuous quality improvement process, to reflect the research and implementation insights that we've gained, it's been really important that to note that this shift did not change the 5 core competencies of social and emotional learning. We really build out examples of the skills that help both children and adults navigate and contribute to our increasingly diverse society, and really highlighting the awareness of different cultures and social norms, demonstrating open-mindedness, and making decisions that support our families and communities. And on that point, on families and communities, I mean, we saw it just up front and center with the pandemic, that more than ever, our families and communities are very present and aware of what's happening in the school. And since the foundation of CASEL, communities, families, schools, parents have been central to the work. And that means we know and knew moving forward to really highlight the importance of teachers, students, parents, out of school time providers, student support professionals, really everyone who is within the community of school and the lives of children.
That's outstanding, and I love that how you thought about that, because I think about even today, and that we had all those stakeholders today talking about how they do social emotional learning and how the definition aligns perfectly to that. So I thank you for sharing and giving us that clarity. Next question I have is, when we hear the term social emotional learning, we hear this term a lot. That's our theme. So it's not a moment, but a movement. But we hear this term social emotional learning all the time. But to see it conceptualized and applied within greater variance, what does high quality SEL concretely mean to you?
Yes, thank you. So to me, systemic SEL really means understanding the evidence-based practices, understanding the local context, and really how to achieve the benefits for every student. And so systemic to me means we're not talking about a 15-minute activity in one class or a one-off professional development session for our educators and school personnel, but really that the entire ecosystem of the school community is committed to social emotional learning. That means, again, families, schools, communities working together to promote social emotional learning, and that the efforts are supported by the policies and resources of the districts and states. Um, for students, this might look like the bus driver greeting them by name in the morning, a familiar face to welcome them as they enter the school, the classroom learning that really helps them grow and practice these social emotional skills and is also responsive to their personal needs so that they can succeed. I also think it's important to call out that to me, systemic SEL means that it's tailored and it's not a one size fits all. We know that SEL has to be aligned with local priorities because communities are different, the needs are different. And I also understand that these tailored SEL supports, they look like the parents, the student, community members, educators, everyone at the table coming together to plan, to talk about implementation, the evaluation, and really to define the priorities and needs and make decisions about the right programs and practices that align to the shared goals. I also think that systemic SEL means that it's evidence-based, and we want to ensure that SEL practices are effective in achieving the goals. And CASEL offers the program guide that really helps local communities choose evidence-based a program that aligns with the goals that are shown to be effective. And I think it's also really important to note that social emotional learning is beneficial for every student across backgrounds, races, social economic status, disabilities, zip code. You know, for too long, a lot of the education strategies were seen or identified as beneficial for some students, but really helped create unequal access. And I think it's important to note that high quality SEL and systemic SEL helps to create greater opportunities for learning and development so that really every child can thrive and be successful.
Oh, we are in full alignment there, and I love that you're highlighting that and giving these concrete examples to how and what high quality social emotional learning looks like at a systemic level. So I really appreciate that for outlining that for everyone here today. So I want to build on that a little bit, and thinking about traveling around the country and having an opportunity to work in different communities. What do you say to someone who suggests that it's not a school's responsibility to directly develop social emotional skills? What would you say to educators that think they have to choose between academics and social emotional learning?
That this is a great question, and I see it and feel it as a parent. I have two boys who are in elementary school. I have a third, no, a rising third grader. I'm promoting him already. He's in second grade, and a fifth grader. And I think about this from a parent's perspective, but then also as an educator. And I have to say, one of the things I really believe is that we cannot bifurcate SEL and academics. We just can't separate the two because we know that learning is social and emotional. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And I would begin by asking parents, what do they want for their child's or children's education and future? And when I've had those conversations, overwhelmingly, I hear the same things that I know I want as a parent. I want my kids to be happy, to be healthy, to have the right skills in their toolbox to achieve whatever career and life goals they should choose. And my two boys have very different personalities. So it's really about two different, it's not a one approach. It's really understanding what those needs are. And then we also know that social emotional skills are critical to achieving and really cutting through many of the barriers. And so, how to help students and young people really talk concretely about understanding themselves, how to understand their sense of purpose or define their sense of purpose, how to stay motivated and plan towards their goals, and how to have healthy relationships. And now more than ever, I think it's important to highlight the importance of understanding different perspectives. One thing we saw with COVID is that the world isn't getting any smaller. With technology, kids are actually being exposed to even more people from different places. And so, how can we just really ensure those skills? And then on the academic side, like I mentioned, it's not either or or. All of the brain science that has come out in the last 5, 10, 15 years shows us that when students have supportive relationships and opportunities to not only develop but practice these social, emotional, and cognitive skills, the brain actually builds new connection and it deepens and accelerates learning. I think that's the beauty of this moment in time is we have more research than we've ever had before. And so I think it's important to build on the decades of research that have consistently shown that students participating in SEL have shown improved academic performance. And so I think it's just so important to make sure that we are integrating these now more than ever.
Absolutely. I mean, we had a panel on that earlier, and you just really spoke so clear to that. And I actually channel on our student panel, a young lady named Dominique. She's in the 8th grade, and she was asked the same question, and she said, "Well, let me tell you, these are verbatim. This is what she said. Let me tell you, SCL is academics." And I think
Mhm.
that you perfectly shared that in terms of your response there. So really appreciate highlighting that. And so to build on that, as I have the opportunity to go to different communities, and I know that you do as well, what is the common misconception about social emotional learning right now? And how are you and CASEL problem solving with that misconception in mind?
Yeah, so there's actually, I would say there's three things. One, there's confusion and misinformation over the term of social emotional learning. And so now more than ever, we are trying to make sure we do our part as a leader in the field and the collaborative to put as much information out into the field that highlights what SEL is, the research and the evidence behind it to help not only educate people who are outside of the world of education. Within the world of education, we pretty much know that there's a broader understanding of what social emotional learning is. But when you start talking about parents, when you start talking about policymakers who are not coming from the field, there is a lot of misinformation and confusion. And so there's a lot of work that we're trying to do to put the best information out into the field and to clarify. The second is that what the role of SEL is in school and at home, and our schools overstepping by, teaching these skills, and really us highlighting that the one of the grounding pieces of social emotional learning and approach to it is the the parent, family, and community partnership, and really making sure that folks understand that no, parents should absolutely know what's going on. Communities should absolutely be involved. Like that is a fundamental tenet of what social emotional learning is. So that's another piece. And then also, it's been interesting trying to clarify CASEL's role versus our program provider. CASEL itself is not a program provider or a curriculum. Our primary focus is really on elevating quality implementation and the science of SEL. So, regardless of what specific SEL program or practices a community has selected as the right fit for them, CASEL's framework helps to support high quality SEL implementation and continuous improvement over time. I would also say that folks don't really realize that CASEL has three very strong arms. It's not just the research, which is huge, but it's the policy and practice all working together for that high quality systemic SEL that we talked about earlier.
Well, that's so outstanding, and thank you for clarifying that, and even the role that CASEL plays in helping to demystify these misconceptions. And so that brings us into our theme. And I think about we sat and thought about what could we say? How could we talk about SEL for this year's symposium? So today's theme is not a moment, but a movement. Not a moment, but a movement. And how do we ensure that social emotional learning does not become a trend or a wedge issue, but a transformative and sustainable tool to prepare our young people for the future?
Yeah. So first, I'm going to answer this from a personal perspective. Many people have asked me, Aaliyah, why did you step down from a sub-cabinet role at the U.S. Department of Education to lead this work now? And it is because of my fundamental belief of how critically important social emotional learning is to not only the recovery, but the long-term success of our students today. And I feel like that my platform as a policy influencer and experience, my realities as a parent who had, when the pandemic started, my boys were in kindergarten and third grade. So you want to talk about living it real time. And then also as a practitioner and understanding and seeing in the classroom and in the building how important those relationships are, how important the actual classroom environment and the school environment are into student outcomes, not solely the academics. And so all of those things cumulatively, I think, are really critical in being able to showcase, like, no, this is paramount to the future of education, and we can't talk about the future of education and our young people without SEL being front and center of the conversation. Which, to the point of being front and center, I think it's also centering the voices and the experiences of our students and families and educators. We know that we have to authentically, as you all have, engage students, engage our families and our communities, and really break down some of the jargon and get clear on what our goals are, because really we have more similarities than we do differences. And really ensuring that SEL implementation reflects the strengths, the needs, and the priorities of local communities. And then we have to focus on quality. It's not just the focus on how to do social emotional learning effectively, but what the quality and the evidence really means. I think it's also important to know that we have to continuously improve and look at what the research is saying that helps us answer the question of what's working for who and under what circumstances. And I also think that a commitment to the outcomes that really show that every child is able to thrive is really important. And I also think that SEL is a mainstay. We have already seen, to your point on this movement, that over the last few decades, since CASEL coined the term, we've seen communities across the country and even across the globe start implementing SEL. And so I do think that the future of SEL is really bright because it has the power to really support our young people and adults in living healthier lives. So,
I love it. The future is bright. You can't do high quality education without high quality social emotional learning, and the two are synonymous. And thank you for illustrating that for us. And I know that people right now got the pads out or they're typing up the notes as you drop these gems so that they can take them back to their own communities and be able to move forward in this work. So one aspect of social emotional learning is adult social emotional learning, right? So we're gonna spend a little bit of time in terms of talking about you and some of the things that you've been doing. So the first question that I have is, what has been your biggest challenge as you've become CEO of CASEL, and how have you approached tackling that challenge?
So I started in January, and in my now 5 months into this role, I stepped into this role at the time when the political tensions around SEL have really been steadily mounting. And if I say, if I have to say one of my number one challenge, it's been how to manage the tale of two stories. And I say the tale of two stories because we see parents, the overwhelming support by parents, by students, by educators, and calling out the need for social emotional learning and the realities of what life is like without these skills and tools. Then we have the other story that's being portrayed nationally, that SEL is um, the Trojan horse for something else. It's critical race theory. It's they're trying to couple it with all of these things that are not, that we know is not SEL. And so how to really balance the two and be very clear in managing the message and really amplifying the stories and the realities. So um, recognizing the political climate that we are in, and also that we're heading towards midterms, and it's a massive election cycle. We have 36 gubernatorial elections. We have over 430 some odd legislative seats that are up for grabs. And there's not a politician, there's not a state that's not talking about education. So recognizing how critically important and political education is, and making sure that we're leaning in a bipartisan way and elevating the needs of our community. So I would say that by far, has been the trickiest, but also the most exciting. My political wonky nerd in me loves midterms in this time of year because elections have consequences, and so I think how we approach the midterms will make a huge difference for the future of education. And I would say the last thing is um, really, really being clear that social emotional learning is not just this thing, that there is evidence behind it, that it has a history of being nonpartisan, that it is really part of an educational framework that can be truly tailored to the needs of local communities. And we know how important local control is. And so for me, the focus has remained to be constant in this conversation around SEL, and also the real recognition that we need strong leadership now more than ever in the field of education. And so to really lend my voice in an authentic way to have impact for so many who wouldn't have a voice otherwise.
I love that, and we're honored that you are one of those leaders in education. Excuse me, here in our country, leading CASEL, because we know you just illustrated how important and that challenge that you're working through, and how that's going to have impacts, not just at a federal level, but also at state and local levels. So really applaud you for that work and taking up that opportunity to do so, and we appreciate you. That actually brings me into another question. So thinking about our audience members, and for the audience here who work inside of schools, which I would say is just about almost everyone, what should they prioritize as they plan for next year around social emotional learning?
Hmm. So, number one would be relationships, and relationships at every level. We know that at the core of the work, relationships with one another matter, and we should be prioritizing how to really promote those caring relationships at every level of the school ecosystem, making sure that all students feel valued and connected to their peers, to the adults who are providing care, and making sure that the educators and staff also feel the same sense of community and support. Creating those stronger relationships between schools, families, and community partners is really key. And we know that these relationships really help build the foundation for all the other work that comes after it. And it's actually one of the things that CASEL is also making a priority for this first year, is really highlighting the importance of family, school, and community partnerships and those relationships. Because in order to do SEL well, in order to implement SEL well, you have to have those partnerships and relationships.
Absolutely, and that actually leads me to the next question. But I also want to encourage the everyone listening that's tuned in to use the question and answer feature. I know that there's tons of questions that you may have that you would like to have asked to Dr. Aaliyah Samuel. So please use the question and answer function to drop questions in the chat. And so to build on what you just said, thinking about those also outside the school walls, which also makes up many of our members who are joining today. For audience members who support education from outside the school building, how should they prioritize as they plan for next year around social emotional learning?
Yeah, great question. I think one is that local coalition building, and again focusing on those partnerships. I think it's critical to think about who those community partners are, and if you haven't already, start thinking about how to bring together a shared vision for the community to really build a coalition that reflects the entire school community and really incorporates a lot of different points of view, which can help foster innovation and really make sure that the plans can meet the needs of all learners. And I think for those who are leading state or district policies, now is the time to really focus on how to create the conditions that help SEL thrive in schools and communities, and to not get focused on the political distractions or other distractions, but really focus on what's best for every child.
Absolutely, and I like I said, I know the questions are starting to roll in here, but that I think about what you just said and how important that is for our young people when out of school and in school work together, what that can impact, how that can make students and impact communities. Moving forward, one of the panels that we had today was also around SEL, the importance of social emotional learning skills, but for the workforce. So we had people representing actual employers and companies that are hiring people in the tech space. And they were talking about, again, why it's important to develop social emotional skills, because we know that our employers are asking for students to have those skills when they walk in the door. And so all employers are talking about social emotional skills. How do we get K through 12 education to see and respond to this need?
Yeah. I think number one is really underscoring that future success for our students is not just graduating or leaving the K 12 system. And the future success is not just getting a job, but these are really about life skills and a wide range of skills and attitudes that will help our students and young people succeed in every aspect of their life. And I think one of the ways to bring this into the K 12 system is really thinking about future readiness with graduate profiles. And we're seeing a lot of states moving in this direction. My state, I live in Virginia, they have the profile of a graduate here with those SEL skills. And I think education leaders can think about how to make the connections really explicit that align to the workforce readiness efforts and the demand, as well as the SEL skills throughout all of K 12. For example, as students in the younger grades explore career choices and pathways, it's a perfect opportunity to build self awareness of their strengths and their skills. In the older grades, when students work towards more specific career goals, whether it's at internships or coursework, it's an opportunity to practice communication skills and teamwork and understanding the perspectives of others. And so I think that there's a lot of ways to be very intentional and explicit in the intentional in the alignment and explicit in the skills. CASEL has also been working with 8 states across both party lines, blue and red, to align these guidelines and standards to workforce and career readiness. And so I think we're going to see more and more of this because SEL has proven to not just be a workforce skill or an academic skill, but these are life skills.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you highlighting that in terms of that alignment that needs to be made for schools and districts to think about that, because ultimately when we're thinking about our kids, it's that when they leave our high schools, they will be gainfully employed after they attend college or even right out of 12th grade. Students are going to go into the workforce. And so I appreciate you highlighting that alignment there. So we have some questions that have come in, one from Shelly. And she has asked, what are some suggestions to offer for schools that are having challenges in building relationships with their staff, students, or families?
Great question. And, not to pun it back, but I will say this. We know that the people closest to the problem always have the best solutions. And this is where engaging key staff, key students, and families to ask them what do they want to see. And it's not a broad swath, but really thinking intentionally on who to elicit feedback from to start to get different points of feedback. And I think it's also important to set up different structures for relationships and having check-ins and using community building strategies. And so I think it's really important to listen to those who are closest and who we're trying to fundamentally serve.
I think that you have definitely answered Shelly's question, but I know I always think about questions sometimes, and I'm like, somebody else had that question too. So I know that there's somebody else out there who was thinking the same thing. Our next question, it comes from Caroline, and she has asked, wondering how you're approaching the work you're doing in a bipartisan manner.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're doing in order to be able to do so is to really stick to the evidence and the research and to be able to highlight that it's not a matter of opinion or what I think, but one being able to showcase just how much of SEL is grounded in the research. Number two is being able to really focus on local feedback and local control and really recognizing the roles that communities have in being able to select their program, select their approach, develop shared goals, and really how that does look different from community to community and honoring that community voice. And also, when we think about our messaging, we as well bring in diverse constituents to get feedback because we want to be able to showcase the evidence, but be able to articulate it in a way that people can hear the information. And so I think that's just a couple of ways that we're doing it. Also, there's been a lot of conversations around mental health and well-being, whole child, and being able to showcase how SEL is an approach to addressing wellness and the wellness of our students and the adults as well.
Outstanding, and I love that because I think just listening to you talk through this whole time, and you constantly always mention social emotional learning as skills. And what I found is that there's no community that you can't go to, red state, blue state, purple state, and say, so we're talking about skills. And nobody says, well, I don't want my kids to have skills. Right?
Well,
Nobody says that. So I really
100%.
appreciate that
Well,
you.
and also I would add, for example, when you look at some of the anxiety needs, the stress needs, and the overwhelming recognition of the social pieces that were missed during the pandemic, that was universal to everyone. Kids across both, or families who had kids who came from families across both political lines, missed play dates, missed proms, missed homecoming. I mean, this impacted everybody. So it truly is not a partisan issue, and it impacted all of us. And so to be able to highlight a comment I made earlier, how we're more similar than different, I think is really important.
Absolutely. And so questions are starting to pour in, and they're amazing. So lots of people are so excited to hear from you. Um, One here from Alyssa, and Alyssa has asked, how do you help schools and districts make the distinction between mental health supports
Mm.
and social emotional learning?
That is a great question. I was actually just on a call with some school board members on Monday who are also trying to differentiate this very thing. And I think one of the things that's important to note is that we are not asking teachers to be therapists. We're not asking teachers to provide mental health support, but that social emotional learning is the foundation, the anchor, the universal approach for that can lead to mental well-being. And then recognizing the need for specialized support by having school guidance counselors, social workers, and more intensive supports for students who do need that mental health support that's at a different level. And really, the going back to the evidence and the research that shows that SEL really serves as protective factors, and those when kids have those strong relationships, when they have the skills, it helps to buffer against some of the mental health challenges. And so really just being clear on SEL being a component to wellness, but when we start talking outside of that, that there's really specialized care and approaches that are outside of SEL.
Dr. Samuel, I love how you use the language to talk about these concepts that people are thinking through, and trying to navigate in their school districts, in their school buildings. So thoroughly appreciate how you articulate that to help move us all forward. And so that brings me to another question. I know it wasn't in our list of questions, but one of our panels was around SEL and technology, and like different companies that are doing that work. What have you seen, just in terms of technology playing a role in helping students develop their social emotional learning skills?
So that's a tough one. So technology definitely is playing more of a role in all of our lives, and we know that kids have gadgets, mine included, and they will look up resources. And in some cases, the technology is being used as a way to connect students to different types of supports. And we're also seeing creative ways for students to be able to share how they're feeling, be connected to other resources. And so I do think it's going to be an interesting trend to watch. I just returned from Israel on Monday, so I am still a bit jet lagged. It was a trip of a lifetime, but still recovering. And right now, Israel is actually approaching, they have an SEL tech challenge where they're doing just that, is looking at different um, modes of engaging with technology in SEL. And so it's going to be an interesting trend to watch.
I appreciate you highlighting that, and overall just seeing how we can use STL to for critical supporting digital citizenship. So I really appreciate you highlighting that and sharing that trip. And I know that was probably a really amazing trip. And thank you for highlighting that, and really appreciate that. So that really brings most of our questions to a close here. I'm thoroughly grateful that you took the time to be with us today. I think that we hit a home run, or we hit that grand slam, with your responses around the work that is happening across the country, and how CASEL is leading the way, how you are leading the way for social emotional learning to not just be a moment, but a movement. Thoroughly appreciate you. Is there any last words that you want to share with everyone here today?
Yeah. I think the only thing I would like to share is for us to stay the course. Us being the collective us and we. And I know this work of addressing the needs of our students and educators, it's very real. It's very real, it's very present, and it's hard work. And sometimes it feels like we're getting opposition from all sides, or just that the need is so great, but we each have so much power to create change in our concentric circles. We each sit in chairs that touch, dozens, if not hundreds of people in our own communities and schools. And so just not to underestimate the power of your individual impact and our impact as a collective on the next generation, because they really are depending on us.
Oh, I love how you and with that right there, the next generation is depending on us. Thank you so much, Dr. Samuel. Concluding our symposium with your voice really brought coherence to the day. And again, just honored and thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right, everyone. As we close here, we are so honored you joined us today. What I would love for everyone to do before you depart from us is please drop in the chat one highlight from the time in the symposium today. It could be from the student panel, any of the other panels that took place, the showcases, our fireside chats with Dr. Jamil Zaki, Dr. Aaliyah Samuel. So please just drop in the chat. Let's see some of the learnings that took place today. Would love to just see that quickly before we all part ways. Just drop in the chat. Let's just learn from each other. Have our own professional learning community, if you will, that will take place now. So please just drop in the chat again. A learning from today. If there any one of the panels, from hearing from students to our fireside chat to our showcases. I want to read some of these that are going to come in here. Eileen, such an amazing talk. Thank you for your wisdom and knowledge. Hearing from students, highlighting student voice for sure. Student voice, evidence of the work. Yes, research matters. So please, yes, drop those in the chat so we just see what people took away from today. It was so great to have people from all over the country, all over the world. As I heard some of the stats coming in terms of people and where they tuned in. One highlight is SEL and is academics. SEL is academics. Yes, it absolutely is. Dominique really did a great job in illustrating that for us during the student panel. So continue to drop some of those highlights in the chat. And so we hope to see you next year. So we kindly ask for your feedback in the survey. The survey has also been dropped in the chat. We improve by getting better through that. And so how I want to just end this is I want everybody to dream with me for a second. Oh, wait, we got some more. I want to read some more of these from the chat from Kathy. I love considering how tech allows us to role play, to put ourselves into someone else's story, to develop empathy by looking at the world through different eyes, reinforcing the importance of awareness to develop a level of insight. The students' voices, what they had to say was priceless. We need to keep listening to them. Absolutely. Hearing about SEL in the workforce and how to look out for the interview and what to look out for the interview process. Kevin Simpson, centering student voice was a great reminder to ensure that we keep the focus on them. Looking at Jesse, reminder to make the implicit explicit. So obvious, but such a good reminder. Just going through here, so much coming in. Truel, my takeaway: student engagement and understanding their assessments and including their voice in the decision for additional supports. From Tiffany, SEL need a roadmap, resources, and assessment to order for success. So again, so many things. Looking forward to continue to read that comes through in the chat. And so as we close, my parting message is I want everyone to dream with me, because we have a dream here at the Urban Assembly. It's a dream of mine, is that I have this dream that we'll be able to have a country. But I want you to, before that, I actually want to localize it. I want you to think about the town or the school that you're in, and every student being able to talk about their social emotional skills in terms of their strengths, challenges, and needs, alongside their academic skills in terms of their strengths, challenges, and needs. And think about what your school community would look like when students could do both. Then think about the town that you live in and what that would look like. And thinking about the state in which you live in, when all students and all people can do both. And then think about what type of country, what type of world we could have when all students are able to talk about their social emotional skills in terms of their strengths, challenges, and needs, alongside their academic skills in terms of their strengths, challenges, and needs. That's the journey that we're on in terms of SEL not being a moment, but a movement. I know that everybody believes in that. And so we, from here, that is our steps forward so that we make sure and ensure that social emotional learning is not a moment, but a movement. I want to thank the Urban Assembly. I want to thank the Carnegie Corporation for supporting our symposium today. And I hope that everyone really enjoyed today. We look forward to seeing you again next year. Please continue to fill out the symposium. But thank you again for your engagement today. We'll see you soon. This concludes our 2021-2022 Urban Assembly SEL Symposium. We'll see you in person next year. Take care.